Good morning. How is everybody? Don't freak out. It's not like it's nighttime or something. You haven't like missed something or anything. It's not nighttime. It's just that it's like super rainy and very dark here. So I have on my little light to try to make it so that you can actually see me because it's very, very dark. And I have some bad news. So hang on just a second. I'm sorry to do this to you, but Michael has the flu. Michael's wife called me this morning and said, so Michael won't be on. He's in bed. He has the flu. So I'm really sorry. We will be missing Michael this morning, which would be fun, especially with drones. I mean, I know he was going to love this one. So that kind of stinks, but get better, Michael. I hope you can hear me. Get better, feel better. So in all of their house, it's just his wife, Lauren, and two of the kids that aren't sick. So everybody apparently has gotten it. So we need to send prayers up for the whole entire Grande family to get better, like ASAP. So we won't have any like fun little banter this morning between Michael and me. But we do have Representative Steagall waiting in the wings. So I'm going to bring him on in case he wants to do some fun banter. So good morning, Rep Steagall. You want to do some fun banter?
I'm always up for some fun banter. Let's do this.
Before we went on, we were talking about country music and how it's now rap music with a country thing going on. But
right.
Yeah,
no. So my mom was an original member on Hee Haw, if you remember Hee Haw.
So, I didn't know that.
Yeah, original cast member, and of course, that was back in the heyday of country music.
We watched Hee Haw, hee haw haw.
That's right. Yeah, I grew up watching it. Yeah, she was on the first two seasons. Back in the late '60s, actually, before it moved over to the Grand Ole Opry. Yeah, the original Hee Haw series was filmed at Channel 5 in the Channel 5 studio there in Nashville. And then it took about a 1.5 year break and moved over to the Grand Ole Opry. And by that time, she had already went to work, I believe, for RCA, and has all kinds of cool stories to share about her experience with RCA. So anyway,
your mama.
Yeah, my mom. I'll have to send you a picture so you can see what.
That's the coolest. Like. Well, your uncle is Red Steagall.
That's right. I've got my uncle Russell. Everybody knows him as Red Steagall. He's known for his Western swing music and cowboy poetry. He's the official cowboy poet of Texas, and he's got more awards hanging on the wall down at the National Cowboy Hall of Fame here in Oklahoma City than anybody else I know. He is an amazing individual. And then I've also got my Uncle Danny Steagall. He's a singer songwriter as well. Lives down in Fletcher, and he's played with Red forever. One of the most popular songs I think everybody here would recognize that he wrote was and something you would appreciate was a duet by Gretchen Wilson and Merle Haggard called "Politically Uncorrect."
I don't remember that. I'll have to go. But serious, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Jay comes from great stock, y'all. She had to throw the y'all in.
Y'all. That's country.
I'm not sure what. Oh, BR 549.
That's a good one, Robert. Yeah.
BR 549. I know. I loved Hee Haw. We don't have fun stuff like that on anymore. As a matter of fact, our kids would think it was like stupid and make fun of it, which is sad because kids back then, I mean, it was just funny.
It was good. A lot of deadpan humor in there and good, clean family fun. Everybody could sit down and watch it and have a great time.
Yeah.
And see some great performers on stage as well. It was quite the show. One of a kind, one of the longest running series ever. So we miss the Hee Haw. We sure do.
Yeah. I loved Hee Haw. Doom, despair, and agony on me.
Oh yeah.
We always have to sing that song when that came on. I don't know. It's kind of like that whole, time has to go on, and all of that stuff, and you remember our parents saying, my dad was saying something to me the other night about, I keep waking up in the morning and having Benny Goodman tunes in my head. And I was like, I loved Benny Goodman, Dad, but the kids don't know who that is.
Right.
And it's kind of sad because I hate auto tune. I despise auto tune. If you can't sing, don't sing. Don't make a machine do it for you. I don't like it. I don't think there's anything natural about it at all. I'm just not. And my son does electronica. He makes electronic music. And I'm just like, that's not my thing. I miss the good old fashioned, just sing it and play it music.
Do you have a vinyl record player at home?
We have 4.
All right.
But you didn't expect that answer. All of my kids are audiophiles, and they all want to listen to everything on vinyl.
Yeah. Well, I was just checking to see how authentic you really were. So you've either got vinyl or you don't, right?
I've got one back here. It's huge though.
Yeah, tremendously huge, very bigly.
Very huge.
Yeah, that's cool.
Hey, cool. So did you not think that this was so funny? What's up with drones?
Oh, we've been watching this for a while, and it has been somewhat comical to some level, and it's given us an opportunity to kind of take a look at the psychology of the current society as well. And I'd like to touch on that here in a bit when we start talking about all the drone stuff.
Well, let's get into it. I mean, It's already 7:00. If people haven't tuned in by now, where are they?
I don't know. The cool kids are here.
Yeah. The cool kids are here. We love these people who are already here. I will say though, it's tough when flu's going around, and then you get a day like this where it's completely gray and rainy, and it's like so hard to get around.
Yeah, especially that whole getting out of bed part. That's pretty tough on days like this.
That wasn't a favorite of mine today. Nor was going out to take care of the sheep in the rain and coming back soaking wet. That wasn't all fun. So I'm going to throw something up throw something up. That didn't come out well. I'm not throwing anything up. I don't have the flu. But what I am going to do is put up I'm going to share my screen with you. And I'm going to put this up because you and I talked about this yesterday briefly. There it is. So Trump White House, this was her, and I've forgotten what her name is.
Oh, she's amazing.
Levitt? No.
This is our new White House press secretary, Carolyn Leavitt. And Carolyn did an amazing job yesterday. I think she's well ahead of her age in experience and ability to handle her job as a press secretary. And I don't mean that she was just able to handle the bantering back and forth with the reporters there, but she seemed to have some very good explanations for the administration's positions on things and explained things very, very well, and seemed to be very well aware of what was going on within the administration on a wide variety of issues.
Well, that would be new.
Wouldn't it? I would take someone who just knew anything that was going on, but she shows up with this tremendous talent behind the podium that to me didn't really look nervous at all. She was just there as a matter of fact.
Wow.
And I'm super excited to see that and very proud for the job that she did yesterday from behind the podium. She did an excellent job. I just can't say enough good things about her.
Well, honestly, I think, oh shoot, I can see her face and I can't think of her name. She's governor of Arkansas now.
Yeah, Sarah Huckabee.
Thank you. I thought she was one of the best ever. She was always so calm and cool and collected, and she'd just be like, she'd cut your knees out from under you and just kind of like a flick of her head. And you're like, wow, I loved her.
Well, we knew she was destined to be great. And got to see it in action behind the podium there in the press room for a little while. So she's another one of my favorites. She always does a good job.
Yeah. So this will be exciting to see how her last name is Leavitt.
Leavitt.
Yeah. Okay, so she comes to the podium yesterday basically and says, well, guess what? The Biden administration didn't tell you this, but the drones are all coming from the FBI, the DHS, and our federal partners. Is that what she's saying?
You know, I
They
think
were
these
from the
are
government, essentially.
well, there's a whole smorgasbord of people that were flying drones in New Jersey, and let me give you a little bit of history on what we do here. So I've got another business where we watch and gather and analyze intel. And we were closely monitoring this deal over in New Jersey initially because of the reports that, these might be drones that are made in China, flown by Iranian.
You have to say it like Trump. China.
It's very bad, very bad. But anyway, we were interested in watching this entire episode unfold to see if there's any truth to it. And so we're watching the videos, we're watching pictures that pop up, all the discussions of anything drone related out in New Jersey. And what we found was that none of the videos showed anything other than what appeared to be legally authorized drones to be flying anyway. And how could we identify that simply from a video? Well, it's not really that difficult. All these drones had FAA compliant lighting on them. So
explain that, because
sure. Actually, I brought a prop with me.
Oh, good. Hold on. Let me take this one out. Let me take this out so you can get, there you go.
So this is not a very big drone. It's a little bitty fella. But these drones that are commercially made, I should say that, at least the commercially made drones, all have FAA compliant lighting on them, and they'll have little LEDs on the landing gear, struts all the way around the aircraft, and that's what you would see blinking in the videos, and they'll blink either red or green depending on which side of the drone is facing the viewer. That's what.
Oh, I thought that was for Christmas, red and green. No.
Yeah. It is that too. Yeah, multi-purpose there. So we're watching the videos here again. Yeah, Dorn is watching this. Yeah, it is an Air 2. It's a Mavic Air 2. I love this drone. It has a lot of capabilities to it, even as small as it is. But we were watching the drones that were flying and couldn't find anything unusual about them. Now, every video out there that claimed to have a drone in view wasn't actually a video or a picture of a drone. There were helicopters, there were airplanes, stars, and then just some other random lights that would be mistaken as drones. And anyway, this caused a lot of panic across the country. Of course, now there's drone sightings everywhere. And I told one of my intel guys, I said, hey, let's take an old camera, because I've got one that still records on tape. Let's take an old camera out here to Will Rogers and just video an aircraft coming in for landing. And we'll cut the video off before we get any clear definition around the aircraft that's coming in. And we'll just post it. Hey, here's a drone over Oklahoma City. Because I mean, how do you prove that it's not? Well,
were you making up fake news, Jay?
Well, I would suggest that there were a lot of people pushing out what would be fake news. It's fake news. Hold on, I've got something for you on that.
Okay.
Yeah, let me get it here.
Well, while you're getting that, so John says, why can drones fly lower than I can legally fly in my ultralight?
John, that's a good question. So
you're fake news.
There's no fake news. All right, so John, you're not fake news. But John brings up a really good question.
Yeah.
Drones are typically restricted to 400 feet above the ground and lower. And that's a regulation put out by the FAA to help deconflict airspace.
Yeah.
So your ultralights or any other aircraft are typically restricted to 500 feet and above, especially overpopulated areas. And here again, that's for aircraft deconfliction, allows those aircraft to be picked up on radar. And for those that don't know the rest of my background, I was a
Yeah, I was going to ask
KC-130.
you about that. Thank you for picking
Yeah,
that up.
yeah, I should probably give a little bit of background. I've got over 2,400 hours flying the KC-135 for the Air Force, and I've got a few hundred other hours on the civilian side, plus all of my other pilot training. There are a few hundred hours on my pilot training records, but anyway, several hours. So one of the other things that we identified in the videos and the pictures that we're coming across as things in New Jersey were unfolding were different lighting configurations. So some of the aircraft we were able to identify as either helicopters or airplanes simply because of the landing gear configuration or the landing gear lighting or strobe lights, navigation lights, especially over on the helicopter side. It just made it easy for those of us that have had, a few thousand flying hours to identify what it was that was in the air. And when it came to smaller objects like drones, that's where I brought my youngest brother, Bobby, in. He's a drone expert, prior Army EOD guy, did lots of DOD contract work on drone projects and is still currently doing that. So we had our own in-house subject matter expert on that. And we were looking at, like I said, at all these videos and pictures and immediately said, well, we can't really identify anything in the videos or pictures that are coming out. So there's an issue there as far as, saying that this is nefarious activity that we need to have law enforcement get involved with. Well, come to find out, law enforcement were one of the entities that were flying drones out there. And that's okay because that's what they do. And then there were hobbyists that were flying drones.
Yeah.
There were other law enforcement agencies like maybe the FBI, CIA, DEA, whoever it is, all otherwise authorized to be flying drones for their official business.
Why so much at one time, though, Jay?
Well,
Any idea about that?
Well, here's the thing. I really don't think the airspace was that saturated with drones the way that we think it was.
Okay.
What we saw were a lot of videos and
Yeah.
pictures, and that doesn't necessarily equal, a saturated airspace of drones.
Sure.
But one thing that we can kind of conclude here is because of the busy airspace around airports, and out in New Jersey, you have a lot.
Yeah.
You have airports out in that area. Because of those airports, you're going to have saturated airspace, and then you get multiple people generating pictures or videos based off of lights that they see, and now it's either a drone or it's a UFO, whatever it is. And now we've got little green men flying man-sized drones around everywhere in New Jersey. And that's just what we see, from that one aspect. But let's take a look at the rest of the evidence. No one ever saw or has video of any of those drones that they thought were drones. Any of those flying objects that they thought were drones. No one ever saw one take off. No one ever saw one land. No one, there were none that were ever recovered. So no one was crashing them. And I can tell you just from flying drones as often as I do, you're going to crash them. I mean, you're going to run into things. You're going to crash a drone. And then there's
I thought it was just because my husband sucked at flying them, but I'm sorry, that's so mean to say, but he laughs about it too. I mean,
well, it doesn't mean that the pilot is bad, so let's take a look at the other piece of equipment that it takes to fly these things, and then I'll get to the question about the tail numbers here.
Yeah.
So this is a typical controller for a drone. As you can see, I've got my phone mounted here. Most of these smaller drones will run off of some app that you download to your phone for just to be able to get the thing off the ground. Now and Gracie brings up a good point there. Most likely there were people that were, videoing from different angles that were
Joe in his backyard and Phil over across the street, down the street was.
Yeah.
for
So
sure.
instead of the airspace being flooded, the internet is being
Yeah.
flooded with video and pictures.
Good point.
Um,
Now, did you see Dorn's question about aren't these FAA authorized drones chipped to be able to scan or read the tail number from a radar or flight tower?
That's a good question, and there's a little bit of misconception there. And Dorn, what is going on here is the drones themselves have uh, they have the ability to be picked up through some electronic means, depending on how big the drone is. Some of these drones that are FAA authorized weigh less than 0.55 pounds. I don't know why they picked that number, but if the drone weighs less than 0.55 pounds, then it doesn't require FAA registration. And what you're registering is the drone and the controller itself. This is a paired package here, and once that drone is registered with the FAA, if it weighs more than that 0.55 pounds like this one, then you'll end up with this tail number. And I've printed mine off and put it on the drone there, so you can see that, Dorn. But the FAA closely monitors that. The electronic signal that's really going out, though, is the controller is happening over the controller frequency.
So it's not the drone; it's what you're holding in your hand.
Right.
Well, you know what, though, Jay, put a pin in that. Put a pin in that. Because we're going to be moving on here in a little bit to talk about what our state is doing with drones. And I want to be able to come back to that because what you're saying isn't making any sense to me in light of what we're going to talk about. So,
okay, we'll tie it all together.
Pin. Okay, so keep going.
Okay, so this controller is paired with that particular drone. Obviously, that's how we fly the things. And Jenny, I'm not going to suggest your husband's a bad pilot when I say that these things you're going to crash them. The reason I showed you the controller here and the phone here attached to it is that sometimes these drones will lose connection. Remember, we were talking about sometimes these drones will just crash. And if the airspace over New Jersey was really that saturated with drones as the internet suggested, then we would have seen crashed drones left and right, just simply because there would have been connections that were lost. I've lost my drone multiple times due to bad connection. I haven't intentionally or unintentionally crashed it by running it into things. Every time this drone has crashed into anything, it's been because of a lost connection with the controller while the drone was moving, and before it stopped on its own, it ran into something. So anyway, we couldn't find any evidence that the airspace out there was actually saturated with drones or that our enemy was involved in any kind of nefarious activity. We were looking for any kind of open source intelligence in addition to the rumored intelligence, and we even visited with people on the phone for the human intelligence side of things, and couldn't find any evidence that there were nefarious activities. But the next thing in this line of thinking is, well, what is the state of Oklahoma doing in regard to the response of everything that's going on out in New Jersey, which is probably where you're going next.
So I'm going to pull it up.
Okay. I'll let you pull it up before I start talking about it.
All right. It'll just take a second. I'm hoping it will anyway. Let's go to this one. All right. So this is Governor instructs Department of Public Safety to protect Oklahomans against potential aerial threats. And this was put out on the 16th. It was an executive order signed by Governor Stitt, who directed Tim Tipton, the Commissioner of Public Safety and Homeland Security, to immediately procure mobile counter UAS detection systems to support state and local law enforcement in responding to recent UAS activity. These UAS detection systems will arm our law enforcement agencies with the ability to detect and identify UAS activity. Well, then there was another, here's what this actually looks like, that what he this is in the Oklahoma Voice. They put an article out, Barbara Hobrock, $30,000 to purchase counter drone mobile units. And that's what these look like. These guys are sitting here. This is a mobile unit. This is a mobile unit. That's what these look like. So there you go. All right. Now that we've done that segue.
Okay, perfect. So I'm glad you found the picture of these things. These pieces of equipment are not actually counter drone pieces of equipment. They don't take drones down. That would be illegal to do. The state of Oklahoma doesn't have any more authority to take drones down that are operating legally than they would to take down any other aircraft. Otherwise, we get into the situation that Tom Gann is trying to address, with this flock deal, where we're just monitoring and then looking for a crime, completely bypassing the due.
Gosh, that doesn't sound right to me.
Doesn't it?
Aren't there some amendments that actually cover that?
I think so. And yeah, I think
maybe
so.
The fifth. I don't know. So here's what they say. Now, this is just news. I'm not going to call it fake news, but I'm going to say the news media sometimes doesn't quite, they say counter drone mobile units. Would you call them counter? I mean, what you just said is you can't shoot them out of the sky. And I don't know if I told you this or not, but my cousin worked for Battelle for a number of years, and who is a contractor for the government, U.S. government. And he actually patented an electronic device that you just pointed at the drone, and radio signals sever the contact between the drone and the pilot's, whatever you call it.
Yeah, the controller.
Controller. Thank you. I should have gotten that one. So those really, I mean, they in the military use them, especially in Iraq. You just shoot the thing at them and it would knock the drones out of the sky. That's not what this is about.
Right. No, this is, like you said, this is not actually a counter drone mobile unit. This is a drone identification and tracking unit.
Okay.
And the technology that comes in these tracking units allows the operator to do two things. One, identify the drone and data about the drone, like the direction it's heading, its velocity, its altitude. And then it also contains the technology to identify the controller itself. Remember, these two items are not really geographically located at the same place at the same time. One of them is at some other altitude during operation. So really what this does is it gives the operator the ability to find the operator of the drone much quicker than having to scout around an area looking for the operator, just because we've been able to find a drone in the air.
Okay, I knew there was a video out there, and if you don't mind, I'll show the video. It was KOCO, and I'll turn this up and see if you guys can hear it.
More and more drones like this one are filling the Oklahoma sky, raising concerns on exactly what they're flying over. Now state law enforcement getting in the game.
So we've had to rapidly catch up.
Oklahoma now has watchdogs in the sky, safeguarding critical infrastructure from unmanned aerial systems.
When all the issues started coming up around the country with the drone sightings, Governor Stitt directed me to purchase some mobile or portable drone detection systems.
4 portable drone detection systems are now strategically placed around the state, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice, a $30,000 investment. OHP gave us a demo on what they do and what they don't do.
So it'll give us a location of where the remote controller is.
We can identify that the drone's in the air, what the elevation is, what the speed of that drone is, and what its flight path is. That technology does not identify where the person currently is standing that's operating the drone, but under FAA regulations, they have to be line of sight.
The state can't forcibly take down drones. It falls under FAA guidelines like an airplane. Apart from protecting, the new detection system will also serve as air traffic control for emergencies like a wildfire or tornado where drones are being used. Reporting, Kylie Thomas, KOCO 5 News.
All right, so there you go. What are your thoughts on that one? I lost you.
How's that?
There you go. Now I can, yes.
Yeah. Well, my initial thought is we just spent $30,000 of taxpayers' money that we didn't need to spend. If DPS needed the ability to utilize technology to serve as an air traffic control mechanism for drone usage during the aftermath of an emergency, I don't know that this is going to give them everything that they need. I don't see this technology giving them as robust of an answer to that question as they might believe. But we'll see. However, the reason I think we just wasted $30,000 was because this was we have to recognize that this was a knee-jerk reaction to something that was going on in another part of the country that ended up being nothing but rumor. There was no nefarious activity out in New Jersey at all. And then the second point I'd like to make is most of these drones that we utilize for search and rescue or search and recovery efforts like we've done, we've got live video feed going to our phones from the cameras of these drones. So if we needed to be able to direct a drone to look at a certain area or fly to a certain altitude to give a certain view, then we could very easily do that. The Mavic Air 2 that I fly and the Matrice 350 that we have access to with my brother for all of our search and rescue and search and recovery efforts, these drones all have the ability to live feed over the internet anything that is being captured on camera. Now, I've seen other emergency operations centers utilize that technology at the EOC itself while the drone operator was out in the field. So imagine, if you will, the state EOC gets stood up for some sort of natural disaster response, and you've got our team out on the ground taking video of what's going on out at the scene, and we're live feeding video back to the EOC, and they're directing us on where to go with that drone. So that information itself is way more valuable than just being able to direct where the drones go, or being able to see where they are through the app that was available on this drone tracking device. The live feed information is way more valuable and easily accessible.
We know Dorn has a comment here that's another pretty good one. We should be very concerned about the made in China swarms of AI UAVs and UGVs launched from naval ships equipped with these advanced military programs currently being advanced. I mean, if we're concerned about TikTok reporting data back to a Chinese data programmer, why aren't we concerned about this?
I think we are. And I think, one of the things that even Mr. Wonderful is addressing at the federal level is the capturing of data, not just through TikTok, but as an overall effort by foreign nationals.
Yeah.
And so, Dorn, I understand what you're saying, and I get that. And there's a lot of drones out here like this one that are made in China. and use an app with location services. So, there's all kinds of data that's being captured on these things that's easily accessible by the owner of the application itself. The difference between DJI and TikTok. DJI is the manufacturer of this drone. Is that DJI has actually followed federal law, and they have a U.S. presence here. As a matter of fact, my drone has been repaired by the the DJI facility down in Fort Worth, which was really nice because that's pretty close to Oklahoma City. I got it back in the same week that I sent it down there.
Okay, so John's got a comment that I'm going to pull up here in a second, and this is something that I think even initially we had talked about. These drones are unreal. 300 feet in the air, they can see and hear you like you're standing next to the person while being displayed on a big screen in the back of a truck or an SUV. And that there was a bill, and I'll throw this up here just a second. There was a bill in 2022 that was signed by the governor, House Bill 3171. And it says that was authored by Senator Michael Bergstrom, which creates a misdemeanor offense for an unlawful use of drones. And it's aimed at eliminating drone use to trespass or surveil private property without the owner's permission. The new law defines an unlawful offense as drone usage with intent to eavesdrop or do surveillance, observe, photograph, record, amplify, or broadcast sounds or events in a private place, intentionally observe another person in any place where there's a reasonable expectation of privacy, or land a drone on the private property of another without the other's consent. But I want to back up here, and I want to say, which creates a misdemeanor offense for the unlawful use at drones. This doesn't say anything about the government. It looks like it's protecting me from my neighbor, not me from the government. And I think there might be a bigger concern there.
Well, I can definitely see where that could be the case. And I'm trying to remember here. I believe that we were entertaining a bill, and don't quote me on this or publish this on your podcast.
It's too late. We're on.
I think we actually took a look at a bill that would have allowed county assessors to utilize drones to assess private property. And I think we didn't pass that out of the same concerns. Here's government. It's not my neighbor now anymore. In a sense, it's government kicking the door open to surveil me whenever they deem necessary by their own laws, and which causes the same type of issues. The protection of privacy and all of that. And of course, how I feel about property taxes anyway. So I was like, if this is going to help the assessor assess more property taxes on me, I'm not going to help them do that. And I'm not going to help them take more of my neighbor's money either. But anyway, I mean, the bigger issue here was that it was going to kick the door open for the potential violation of Fourth Amendment rights, reasonable search and seizures issues. So anyway, I understand the point now. Back to John's question about or statement about video and sound. I don't have any drones that record sound or amplify sound. And recording and picking up sound takes up a tremendous amount of bandwidth. In addition to, it's an emergency management drone. I'd be interested in knowing what that model was, because I don't know of anything that actually picks up sound. But it may be out there. It just maybe I'm not aware of it. But the video, to your point, the video is awesome. The little drone that I've got has got a 4K camera on it. It's unbelievable. Now, while we were out in Eastern Tennessee, North Carolina, flying these drones on search and rescue and search and recovery efforts, we needed that kind of definition, even post-production, to be able to zoom in and find things, look over different areas while we're back at the Intel shop downloading all this information. So it became very valuable to us. I can understand how that could be used for nefarious purposes as well. And that's why we need to make sure that the laws that we pass in addressing this protect the privacy of the individuals and don't infringe upon our already constitutionally protected rights. Just because we have some cool technology out there doesn't mean that everybody else wants to play. And we need to recognize that as well. And that's why we need to make sure that anytime we're operating a drone over private property, that we've got that private property's owner or that private property owner's permission, and making sure that our cameras are only capturing data over the areas that we have permission to fly.
Well, I'm going to bring up a sticky wicket here because you know how much I hate legislation just as a rule. And any legislation that doesn't have a specific something attached to it that makes whatever that legislation is, there's a prohibition that can actually be adjudicated in a court. There's something specific that I can take to my DA or whatever and say, okay, this is happening, and here's where it says, you need to take care of it, and here's what the prohibition is. That I looked at that just quickly, at the explanation of the bill. I didn't read the bill. And we had, I don't know what was going on, but I'd say it's been 2 or 3 years now. There was some drone pilot in our area out here in Luther, and the kids and I would be sitting and Dave would be sitting upstairs in our room in here, and we have a great big window that goes all the way across, and you would see a drone come up and be looking in the windows, and it was doing the same thing. It seemed as though, from what I was hearing, it was doing it to people who were serving on the town board at the time. And all I could think of is, well, that's not okay for this. This is my house, and they're looking in my window. And how can that even be okay? And, at that point in time, we didn't have that rule. I think that was probably 20 or 21 when that happened, because I think a lot of interesting things happened in 20 when people were not busy and had a lot of time on their hands.
Sure.
But that is a concern, though, Jay. I think if somebody does do that and I see that in my window, I shouldn't have to put up with that. That's invasion of my privacy. And that's just from a personal level. That's not government, obviously, which, we're probably going to talk about even more. What would you do if that happened?
If it were my window that I found.
Well, if you've got a 12 gauge, blammo. Just kidding. I'm kidding.
It's a valid question. I don't have a big bay window out in front of my house, but yeah, Lisa's bringing it up here. I think the peeping Tom laws, and this is exactly where I was going to go with it. I think the peeping Tom laws should have covered that situation to some extent. No one, including government, can come, legally come surveil your house like that.
Yeah.
Unless they've got a warrant to do so, but
who do you even call? Because we were like, well, who do you call? I called the cops, the local cops, and I was like, guys, this is happening. What is going on? And they weren't even really sure what to do. So, what it seems like it's just such an open can of worms.
It could have been, right. And herein lies the issue. How do I protect my property, my family, from activities like this? Man, I would have had, if I were you, I would have had a hard time not taking a 12 gauge to the front porch and gone bird hunting. And
it
is what it is. You fly a drone over my property, and I perceive this as a threat to me and my family, especially with the prevalence of distributing video and pictures online. I've got to protect my kids. from child predators. All of these thoughts start running through my mind, and I'm like, I think I'll take my chances in court if somebody wants to suggest that they were in the navigable airspace with their drone, and I would say, yeah, but you can't park that thing in front of my window and take shots inside of my house. I don't care if it's a drone. You can't walk up to my house and do that with a regular camera either. So, I don't care that this is a camera on wings at that point. I'm probably going to put it down and then take my chances. But, I'm not an attorney, so I can't tell you to go do that. I'm not an attorney. I just play one on television. But
you slept at a Holiday Inn.
I slept at a Holiday Inn Express last night.
Well, but it is such a sticky wicket because you can be sued if you shoot a drone, but then it shouldn't be that you have to have rights on your own property,
Yeah,
like Lisa said. Peeping Tom rules. So if that happened again, you call the police? Do you immediately call the DA's office? How does that work?
Yeah, call the police.
Okay.
The law got signed, or that bill got signed into law. It's a misdemeanor to do that now. If somebody's out on your property and they're if they're just flying a drone over your property, it doesn't even matter if they've hit the record button. And just because these things are flying doesn't mean that they're actually recording.
Right.
But if they're just flying over your property, that's a misdemeanor without your permission.
Okay.
So that's what I would suggest.
Okay.
And then I'd probably take a look at the end of your driveway and see if you can spot anybody down there flying, with one of these things, controlling that drone. And then I'd call the cops and tell them you got them out there.
So Dorn asks, I hate to beat a dead horse, but seriously, AI drone warfare is in the future, and it is being actively developed in China, while we seem to be looking the other way regarding our own defense against this emerging potential threat. The drones we're discussing today are merely toys in comparison. My question for the representative is, are there discussions taking place at the state capitol about this with the National Guard? Because I think that's a great question, because what's going on with Tipton, that's not even, like you said, that doesn't even do anything. That's so. What do you know? Do you know something you can say?
Not really. I can tell you this: legislators don't have a security clearance, so we're not privy to the information that our National Guard may or may not be doing.
Okay.
We don't know that. The feds that have security clearances to deal with that might be able to answer that question a little bit better. But Dorn, I can tell you this, 100% positive. China is not going to beat us in the AI drone competition. I promise you that. And it's only because I know people in that industry. We're way ahead of them. Do we use some Chinese components? Yeah, we use Taiwan components. We use components from all over the world to build the best drones, and a lot of them are made right here too. But we're talking about custom built drones now, which is what you're talking about, and enabling some AI to some level. AI technology is not there yet. They're working on it, and the faster that we get to quantum computing, the easier it will be for AI to advance at much faster speeds. And there is a race. It's almost like the space race as far as quantum computing goes. And we are in a battle with China on that one, and we're the two leading countries when it comes to advancing quantum computing technology. But once we start seeing that in the drone world, then yes, things can escalate very, very quickly. But the drones that we're building domestically to deal with special warfare are not commercial off the shelf drones.
Okay.
These DJIs and like you said, they're toys compared to some of the other technology that we have available out there. The custom builds are where it's at, and that allows our operators to program those things to do all kinds of neat things that the commercial drones don't have the capability of doing. because it would be outside of FAA regulations, and that's why that technology doesn't exist in the commercial side. So anyway, yeah, no, it's a very serious threat, and I can tell you that our military partners are taking a very, very strong look at this, and it is very serious. But we're building a lot of stuff here at home to counter that. It is a very real threat, and I'm not trying to make light of it at all. But the discussion was about what was going on out in New Jersey, and there was nothing nefarious going on out there. But to your point, we do need to be paying attention to what's going on the other than commercial off-the-shelf units.
Well, and then too, because she our little press secretary said they were authorized by the Federal Aviation. So I guess that's a question. So I'm trying to be specific here. So if they're authorized to fly by the FAA, that just means that you have to have a pilot's license for that drone. Is that right?
No.
Okay.
When we say that the drones that they're identifying out there were flown with FAA authorization, all it means is that they were flying in compliance with FAA regulations.
Okay.
The FAA doesn't. There are times when the FAA gets involved in drone flights, but that's initiated by the operator, and there's a process for that. But most of the time, drone pilots just take off and fly on their own without calling FAA, because there's really not any reason to.
Okay.
Unless they're doing something special, like flying within close proximity of a busy airport. You have to have FAA permission to do that. But then there's a paper trail, there's a record of that. And so that would be an example of a proactive FAA authorization, as opposed to someone just flying within FAA regulations, which is more passive.
Okay. Well, let me go back. Hold on. John says drones are doing aerial spraying, lifting hundreds of pounds to do so. Those drones are huge. I was reading something that they are, farmers are using drones for spraying, and obviously they have to be very large to be able to accommodate, like we used to do with planes, right?
Yeah, that's right. And still do.
Yeah. But it would be just a lot less expensive with a drone, I can imagine. So would you have to register that kind of a drone then with the FAA?
Yeah, that drone would definitely fall under those FAA regulations, and you would have to have a commercial license to operate a drone of that size. The payload on those things, hundreds of pounds. You're talking about a very, 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 very big drone at that point. Tremendously huge. I've seen a lot of drones. You'd see they'd be very, very bigly. My brother has a Matrice. It's a DJI Matrice 350. And it sounds really big, and it's a very sizable drone, but it does not have a payload capacity of hundreds of pounds. It can carry, I think it's like 10 or 15 pounds or something like that. But that's a $30,000 piece of equipment that he's got with his thermal payload and everything else. So you can imagine what these agricultural use drones would cost. Maybe it's easier for some farmers to do that, but they're not as widespread as they might be someday, because the cost is so high. But anyway,
well, still less than a Piper. I mean, 30,000. I mean, what are you going to pay for a little Piper, a little twin engine Piper or Cessna? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe
230 anymore. I don't know.
Sure, but I could probably pay a sprayer a lot less than $30,000 to come out and hit my fields twice a year.
Fair enough. So Dorn cracks me up, but it's true. I mean, we can have 750-foot wind turbines, but I can't fly my drone over 400 feet.
Dorn, you can fly your drone over 400 feet. You just have to go through the LAANC process with your drone and get permission from the FAA to do so that they can deconflict other aircraft from around the area. You got to remember, and I ran into this issue on multiple deployments. Remember, I did 9 deployments in the KC-135, and we saw drones almost every deployment. And these are very large drones, and we couldn't even see those things until we were nearly up on them. And there were times when it nearly caused a mishap, despite the best efforts of what we would consider some sort of C2 aerial C2 or command and control efforts, kind of like an ATC, an airborne ATC, if you will. Airspace deconfliction is a very, very big thing, and it's a very real thing. We do not want even anything this small flying through any part of an airborne aircraft that's carrying people. That's a very, very bad thing. Things can go wrong very, very quickly. So
just think about it. I mean, geese, we've had pilots run into geese and it brings down a whole plane.
Yeah. Bird strikes are a very real thing.
Yeah.
So we definitely don't want to put anybody else's life in jeopardy just because we want to fly higher than 400 feet. You like I said, you can do that, and there's a process for it. And the FAA is most likely going to approve it as long as you're not within, a very busy airspace or an area of busy airspace. I know people that do it all the time, but they get approval to do that.
Well, me and Dorn. See how that happened? Me and Dorn are wind fighters, so I think Dorn. Oh my goodness. Poor Dorn. Dorn and I are wind fighters, so I think he's just making a point with that, because I think we should be.
It's being ornery. Yeah.
Lisa says, and this is a pretty good point, sounds like California could use a couple hundred of those to spray water on fires. It won't happen, but it should. That's true. And then poor Harold says, I watched my neighbor use a helicopter to spray his field, and he doesn't move his cows either. They're on the field eating when he sprays. Just make sure that you let me know where those cows are going to market. I know, Droney Dorn. That'll end up what it ends up being now, because I get tongue-tied. Okay, so let's get back to Oklahoma, because that's where you and I live, and that's where you have to go, is down on 23rd and Lincoln. So we've talked about the fact that we spent $30,000 on this drone surveillance system. I'm not exactly sure what questions to ask, but I'm super cynical about it. I just me personally think it was stupid. I mean, it was kind of like, oh, this is happening there, we need to do something about it here. Well, but there wasn't, I mean, I don't see the facility for that. What would be the purpose for us? I mean, we have 3 pretty large military bases here in Oklahoma. You would think that the military has something that they would be monitoring. Shoot, we even have radar, right? Monitoring things. What in the world did we have to get involved in this for? You have any idea?
Well, let's start with the military piece first. It's not legal for us to use our military assets to surveil on Americans. So right.
No, I completely understand that, but we do use it to check airspace, right?
We have an FAA for that.
Okay, so
it is a government entity, but it's not part of the DoD.
Right. So can't the FAA check up on these? I mean, is that not? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to get to the bottom of why that happened, because my personal feeling is if the government is going out and spending money on it, somehow it can be used against us, and I'm not okay with that. So I don't know your thoughts.
Well, we got to remember that just because the FAA has radar capabilities, it doesn't mean that they can see everything with that radar. There's terrain issues, there's buildings, and all kinds of things. And then you've got does that radar pick up something this small?
Yeah.
So there's all of that. And then the ability to pick up the controller frequency. Do we have do we have that? And what's the range of the controller frequency? On this one, it's not that far, which is something else that creates a problem for our friends over at DPS. And I love my friends at DPS. Don't get me wrong. I think our troopers do a good job for us. I'm trying to fix this glare issue and it's falling apart. All right. So, the issue that I see with the mobile equipment isn't that the technology isn't good, or that it couldn't provide, or that it wouldn't provide some solution for us, but to think that this is going to be the proactive way for us to address this really doesn't help us at all. Let's go back to your scenario where you're on your property and there's a drone that you spot outside the front window. Well, you call the police, and they decide to do something, and by the time they get there, the drone is gone.
Right.
So did the drone tracking equipment mobile unit actually do anything for us, or now we're going to have to equip every law enforcement agent, every vehicle with one of these things, just in case they run into a situation where they might need to find a drone controller because someone spotted a drone in the air that they were concerned about. It's kind of like the argument for the camera, the body cams. Are we going to have to put one on every single officer now just to be able to address this? The potential of somebody doing something wrong. Well, I don't know. I don't think that's the best use of our taxpayer dollars, to be honest with you. I think there's other ways for us to address this in a more meaningful manner and be able to keep people safe. But that's just my initial thoughts on it.
Well, like I said, I'm not keen anytime the government says spend money on something, number one, and then when it's done quickly and done with no oversight. So those are like the three strikes.
I'm trying so hard. Yeah.
John has another comment here I did want to put up. Yet with an ultralight, you have no FAA regulations and can fly everywhere over 500 feet. Makes a lot of sense for sure, as long as you stay away from towns and airports.
Yeah. So your ultralights operate typically in class G airspace, which is basically everywhere that's not controlled. But there are FAA regulations that deal with that. So even ultralight's got to follow FAA regulations. There's just a lot less of it. There's less equipment that they need. And the same is true for drones. Like I said, if you have a drone that weighs less than 0.55 pounds, so think of that as an ultralight drone, then you don't have to register it with the FAA. Your controller isn't registered with the FAA. People are flying these things around everywhere, and nobody even knows they're being flown. Well, it doesn't mean
especially with my husband, because it's mainly on the ground or in a tree. Sorry.
A lot of touches, right? We're logging a lot of landings with these drones. Some intentional, but no comment.
No comment on that one, Dorn. Got that one up before I read the whole thing. Let's not talk about mooning anymore, shall we? So let's go, because we're over an hour now. So let's kind of see if we can't bring this in for a landing. See what I did there. What are some of your, let's talk about, to get out of this, let's talk about what are some of your concerns and what you think are some of the solutions to the problems. Or are we just creating problems to find a government solution for them?
Well, yeah, I appreciate what the governor's trying to do and make sure that Oklahomans are protected. But at the same time, I think we need to be smart about the decisions that we make, especially when it comes to, first, the expenditure of taxpayer dollars, and then two, any kind of purchases that are made with equipment that could be used for any kind of activity that falls outside of our constitutionally protected rights. All those things cause concern and pause to me. And that's why I got a hold of the governor's office and had a discussion with them about this before the purchase was ever made. I saw the executive order. I called the chief of staff and I said, there's nothing going on in New Jersey that we need to be concerned about. What is it that we're concerned about here? And the answer was, well, that's not what we're hearing. And I said, who are you hearing it from? And they said, well, we have our sources. And I'm like, I've got thousands of flying hours. I've seen the videos and pictures here. There's not any evidence to point anywhere else. So, what is it really? And so what this looks like from my perspective was just a political knee-jerk reaction to do something about a situation in another part of the country that was perceived to be a threat and wasn't. Anytime we exercise a knee-jerk reaction and it causes us to spend money as a government entity, oftentimes we end up violating individuals' rights as a result. And when we sit back and don't do anything about that, then in essence, we allow it to happen again and again and again and again. And this is how our rights and liberties get trampled on. This is how they get infringed upon. So I take a lot of pause when we take a look at spending taxpayer dollars on things like this. What is it that we're actually trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish here?
Well, I like that idea. I mean, I don't think we do that enough. I think, and I've said this, I don't know how many times, it's probably been hundreds at this point in time. I always feel like what we do is we look here. We just go to the end of our nose. We never stop, and either we don't take time, or it's not politically expedient, or there's some reason why we have to do something now. It's all an emergency. And to fix it, we're going to look at what it is right here that's somehow going to stop it. Right. And the problem always is that we're always on the back foot, because the people who don't like what we're doing, the people who do like government spending and bigger government and surveillance and all of that stuff, they're on the long game. I mean, they're way down the road from us. And yet we don't take time to figure out where they might be. We're just solving the problem that we see under our nose right now. And to me, that's a bigger problem.
Yeah.
If we're going to think we're going to solve a problem, then we need to game it out and find out not just what's going to fix it or band-aid it in the next 15 minutes, but what is it going to do down the line. And I think that's how we end up getting into a lot of trouble and a lot of our rights removed, because so many of these things tend to be backlash things that are seen as things that we have to fix immediately, that have a fix. Some of them don't even have a fix, for Pete's sakes.
Right.
And, we don't take the time to really game the scenario and figure out what would be best for the long term, not for right now. So.
Right. What's interesting here is the folks out in New Jersey were able to figure out that, or even in the White House, were able to figure out that there were no nefarious activities going on out in New Hampshire without having to deploy this other equipment.
This technology. You say technology, it makes it sound like it's better.
Tech. Yeah. Techie tech. So anyway.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope everybody who was on this morning, we had a really nice audience live. So I hope everybody who was on got some questions answered, and, be sure to share the podcast. And I'll throw, Representative Steagall had some really good, I always hate to call you Jay because it just seems, you're a representative.
Call me Jay. Just call me Jay.
Uh-oh, you know what that did? That took me back to an 80s commercial. You can call me Ray, or you can call me to whatever, some beer commercial. I watched too much television, apparently, back in the day. So I've got a couple of clips, of you talking about specific things that I think can probably, if people will just watch that clip, will probably, solve a lot of their questions. So I'm going to throw those up. Make sure you find them on our YouTube channel, which is where they're going to be hopefully this afternoon, since it's raining and I'm definitely not going out anywhere today. I did want to mention one thing really quickly before we get off of here today.
Sure.
And Dorn, if you have your meme, if there's some way you can post that, I would love it. So Dorn put together a meme that was the Magnificent Seven. Remember the movie The Magnificent Seven? Mm-hmm. And it was the 7 representatives who voted against the rules in the House, and Jay Steagall was one of the Magnificent Seven. And I mentioned that to you the other day, and I said, hey, isn't that great? You're one of the Magnificent Seven. And you had a take that kind of took me aback a little bit on that. Do you want to give it?
Sure. So I saw the article, and of course, there were a few of my colleagues down at the Capitol that had texted me the article that came out identifying us as the Magnificent Seven, and said, "Hey, congratulations! You're one of the Magnificent Seven." Of course, I'm thinking, does this have something to do with my competitive shooting history? Because I was a competitive marksman for the Oklahoma National Guard for 14 years, and did pretty good. But that's not what it was about. It was about the no vote on the House rules. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the author of the article. I don't think I've ever met him. But what was suggested in the article was that all of us voted, and myself included, we all voted no on the passage of the House rules in an effort to buck leadership. And I wish I'd been given a call by the author of the article to at least get my input on it, because that's not what my no vote was for. As a matter of fact, the new House rules that were voted on and then ultimately implemented in the House were not leadership suggested rules. So that it didn't make any sense for the author to suggest that the no votes were to buck leadership. These were new rules that actually members of the caucus suggested, and the House Rules Committee voted on those, passed them, and then presented them to the caucus, and then the caucus ultimately cast their final vote on the House floor, which is the vote that we're talking about here. There were some initial constitutional concerns that I had about a few of the new rules that I ended up getting better answers to and better explanations to. And then there are some design issues of this new process that I'm not a real big fan of just yet. And I don't know that anybody's going to convince me to change my mind on that, but it is what it is, and it's the process that we're all going to have to work through until we decide to do something else. Now, I'll say this: the House, one of the biggest changes that we've implemented in the House is this 2-tiered policy committee process, and so what's happened is there's 6 oversight committees, and then under every one of those oversight committees, you have your otherwise standing policy committees. And so now all the bills are initially assigned to all these policy bills are assigned to these policy committees. And after passage out of that policy committee, then they're eligible to be heard by the oversight committee, if the oversight committee chairman wants to hear them. And then if it passes out of that oversight committee, then it goes back to the floor leader team, and they decide if they want to publish it on the calendar or to the calendar, and to make it eligible to be heard on the floor. And then it's up to the floor leader in the speaker's office to determine if that bill is actually going to get heard on the floor or not. So by adding another subcommittee, if you will, into this process, we just lengthened the ability and made it more complicated for good legislation like repeal bills to get through, and then also made it much easier for lobbyists to control the process, because now they've only got 6 committees that they've got to work instead of all of the other standing committees. So I think it's low hanging fruit. Now, historically, the House has tried this twice before and it didn't work out either time. So
But
maybe,
you know what? It's just like every socialist to think, "Well, but this time is it. This is the one time it's going to work. We can do it. We're
yeah.
better."
Or we just need to make this one little tweak here, or one little tweak there. We'll see.
Getting a tick.
I know. I'm not a big fan of it. So Julia says a lobbyist dream come true, and I think there's probably a lot more truth to that than what everybody wants to recognize. But we'll
Well, but
see.
the bottom line was, I think it was, for me anyway, because when I saw it, I was like, yes. To me, I thought it was that term being, stuck in that group of the Magnificent Seven. I frankly thought that was amazing, because while I completely understand your perspective, I mean, no, the leadership didn't thrust this on you. This was put together in caucus. But I've also talked to legislators who were not even asked to be part of the caucus that put the rules together. So then you're still talking about an elected official who can't represent the people because they weren't even invited to the table. So there's a problem for me from the get-go for right there. So to me, and I'm not saying for Jay, I'm saying for Jenny, that was a vote against the leadership, because, there were people, and I've already had this, discussion with Chris Banning. He was actually in the caucus that created the rules, but there were a lot of people who weren't.
Sure.
So, that's a problem for me personally. So anyway,
I can give you a little bit more info on the whole rules process. Every member has the ability to suggest rules to the caucus. Every member, everyone can suggest rules. And I'm not trying, by the way, I'm not trying to defend anybody here. I'm just going to give some explanation of the process, but any member can suggest rules to the caucus for a rule change. And that suggestion really can come at any time. Now, typically we see rule changes in the House rules every other year at the beginning of a new legislature. But prior to that, there will be a committee that's put together, and that committee will seek out actively, and this last committee did a good job of actively seeking out suggestions from caucus members for rule changes. And then that suggestion was brought up again at the caucus retreat in December. So members had an opportunity to put in suggestions to changes then as well. Between caucus retreat and a few weeks before, or a couple of weeks before organizational day, I believe it was, or the week before, whatever it was, we had a caucus meeting, and members had an opportunity prior to that meeting to view what the rules committee had come up with, and were given the opportunity to provide any kind of feedback they had to that. Prior to the meeting, they had an opportunity to suggest changes during the meeting. As a matter of fact, I made changes to I offered amendments to more than one rule while we were in that caucus, I believe, and both of those changes were adopted. It was one or two, but anyway, I'd suggested some changes. I wasn't on the committee either, but I was able to propose some changes where I saw some issues, and the caucus votes on that and they adopt it. And then ultimately, once all those changes are adopted, or the rules package at that point are adopted by the majority caucus, then that package is presented to the House in its entirety, where we vote on it. And even at that point, because it's on the floor, and even though we're outside of session and haven't adopted House rules yet, we use historical procedures to either amend or adopt the rules on that vote or during that process. It's really interesting that we haven't adopted any House rules yet, and we're voting on the House rules. What procedures do we follow? Because the House rules dictate which procedures we follow for adopting House rules or any other piece of legislation. anyway, off in the weeds there. But I would say in defense of the process, rules and rule changes those are easy for members to suggest changes to, and you don't have to be on the committee to do that. But we do need a committee to kind of lead the charge there on making those changes. Now, the good news for us this year is there were a lot of our conservative friends that were on that rules committee. And I still have a great deal of respect for my conservative friends there in the House, even after working through what they perceive as good changes to the House rules. I disagree with them on a few of these things, but that doesn't make them a bad person, doesn't make me a bad person. Just means we have a disagreement on what these House rules need to be and what the process needs to look like.
Well, here's something. I'm going to stop you right there. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make them a bad person, whatever. Your personality shouldn't come into it at all because, it's a political thing.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think part of the reason why I've always been that person who wanted to have a Republican checklist. So if you're going to run as a Republican, you need to have a checklist of 10 things, which are the big 10 things that make you a Republican. And you have to sign off on those saying that you accept those things, that you agree with those things. Because I think what ends up happening is that those things necessarily aren't followed. And so then there's not really a guardrail, if you will, for how Republicans act. And so I think that kind of ends up being the bigger issue. If we had those guardrails in there, nobody would even think, oh, well, he's not a bad guy or a good guy. It's not about anything about them. It's about the fact that they're not acting within the guardrails of the Republican principles. And to me, that's the reason why I finally quit the Republican Party, because I think it's nonsense. I mean, if you don't have to say you agree with at least 10 principles that make you different than a Democrat, then why do you even have a party? Then it's just a free for all. Then just do whatever you want. So
some people just like parties, Jenny.
Do what?
Some people just like parties. You don't like parties.
I have one kid that's anyway.
Yeah,
I mean, it's in a sense, it is one of my big bugaboos. I mean, it's an issue for me.
Yeah. No, I get it. But back to the article and being part of the 10th. Well,
I was going to throw this up
7th
because Jim had that amendment to provide transparency without having to have the 1/5 support record of a vote. And then I think there was an issue about that. And then Robert said, it seemed to me that the rules created a second committee for bills to have to pass. If that's true, what's the reasoning for this? And we've talked about this before. And the idea was that it was going to create transparency. But I think, in my personal opinion, it's just going to be another way to keep, for people who are in leadership, to keep bills that they don't want out of committees. That's my personal opinion. So anyway, where were you? What were you saying?
Well, back to the article that we were discussing.
Yeah.
So truth matters to me, and the article portrayed me as casting a vote, against leadership, and without ever asking me how I felt about leadership or why I voted no on the bill or the rules at all. And I wish the author would have reached out to me, because I would have easily explained, here's my concerns with the rules. Everybody's got to follow the rules, even leadership, or there's not any rules. So anyway, to Speaker Hilbert's credit, so far he's following the rules just like everybody else is. So I can't say that my no vote, and I won't, was a buck against leadership, because it wasn't. It was a no vote because of the design, and like some of your viewers are bringing up here, well, what's the purpose of this second committee. Why do we want to do that? Well, the argument being presented is it gives us more time to work on these bills in committee and put, better policy bills on the House floor as a result. And I understand that argument. I get it. I disagree with it. I'm the chairman of the State Powers Committee. And if a bill that comes into my committee needs work, then we work on it in that policy committee. We've always done that. And I've always told the members of an incoming body in my committee that this is a working committee. And historically, that's how we've always operated. We amend the language right then and there because I didn't want to send anything over to the floor leader team that wasn't ready to go to the floor.
Did have questions or
Yeah. And I didn't want to put the floor leader team in that position. I didn't want to put the member in that position. And I certainly didn't want to allow a bill to come out of my committee like we've seen in other committees where, the promise is, hey, we're going to make some changes to this, but we need to get it through because we're up against a deadline, blah, 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 all this crap. And that's, to me, if we need more time to work on policy bills in committee, we need to understand our policy committees have always been working committees to begin with. And if we need more time to work on bills, then maybe we need to address the deadline problems. Maybe what we've done is we've tied our own hands because of these deadlines. And I've brought that up multiple times in the past. I brought it up again this year. Anyway, there's more than one way to skin a cat, but you got to remember that no matter how you do it, the cat ain't going to like it. So anyway, we'll see how well this works. And then we'll go from there.
Well, and Robert brings up another one of my pet peeves.
Yep. So Robert, you're bringing up a good point here. Someone will sometimes just initially propose or just give a brief explanation of the bill, and then somebody will scream out "do pass" with no discussion or no debate. I've actually presented a lot of bills in committee where that's been the case, but to not really to my credit, but I'll say it this way, to our staff's credit, they've written that bill in a way that's allowed the language to be really, really short and easily understood. And what we expect out of our committee members is that they read that bill prior to going to committee. And when they show up, they're ready to work, even if that means, hey, I've actually read this, I'm good with it, and I'm ready to vote on it. I can't say that that's the case every time, and I won't suggest that that's the case every time either. But I have been able to benefit from getting bills through committee relatively quickly because the committee members did their job and they understood the bill. And sometimes if it's a very controversial bill, what I'll do is I'll go talk to these committee members in advance of the committee meeting and ask them if they've got any questions about the bill. What can I address? Are there any changes that you see that need to happen? And I'll get those amendments filed before we go to committee or whatever. And if they don't have any questions, they don't have any questions. So the committee isn't the only time that bill gets discussed or seen, but things that do need to be changed and that do need to be debated, that needs to happen in committee without an immediate do pass. Or even if you get that, the chairman has a prerogative of saying, I hear your do pass, but we're going to slow this thing down and actually somebody over here's got some questions or we've got debate, coming up here. Let's make sure that we address this through the appropriate deliberative process that we're here to do, and not feel like we're so rushed to get a bill through just to get a bill through.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
Totally agree.
All right. Well, it's we're almost at exactly 1:30, which is a good time. So I think we'll probably wrap it up for today, but I thought we had a great discussion. I do appreciate you talking to us about this. I think there's been a lot of misinformation, fake news, about all of that. And I do think that this really did help. So, and I think we had some really good comments and some really good questions. I want to say, I love our viewers. We have the best viewers. They are so on top of things and have such great questions. And except for the one about the mooning, we just have excellent questions. And I think we got a lot of things answered. So thank you, audience. So many of you for being on. And again, sorry, Rumble audience, that Rumble does not follow their programming. All right. Anything else before we get off of here?
No, thanks again for having me.
Steagall.
And I appreciate the opportunity to come speak again, and look forward to next time.
All right. Well, hold on just a second while Juliet says, thanks, Jenny and Jay, for a good show.
Yay.
So hang on a second and let me close out, and then you can tell me what you're going to think about for another show when I'm done here.
Okay.
All right. Thank you again,
soon.
and talk to you soon, apparently.
Okay.
All right, guys. I just wanted to do a quick ending here. I will be doing a live video at 1:00 today because there's been a lot at School Choice Week. I've written a couple of things about that this week. I think a lot of people, and including a lot of our legislators, are, in my personal opinion, having a problem with understanding what conservatism means in terms of education. So we're going to chat a little bit about that at 1:00 this afternoon live. So if you'd like to tune in for that, please feel free to do so. You will want to be here on Friday, and I'm not joking. You will want to be here on Friday, and you will want to get as many people as you possibly can on here with you, because we are going to have Tassie Catherine from Pike Off OTA, who is going to talk to us about the lawsuits that they have against the OTA and about the toll raises that have been well, I don't even think they've been proposed at this point. We're just getting toll raises. So she's going to come on and talk about that. And I know you're going to want to be here to ask questions about that and be in on that. So be here on Friday, 9 a.m. Tassie Catherine from Pike Off OTA will be here, and we will be talking about toll increases. Then you're not going to want to miss, for the first week of February, we have a great show for you. And Representative Steagall just gave us kind of an in on that one. So on the 5th, on Wednesday, we're going to talk about human manure and biosolids. And there are several bills in the legislature coming up about that. It does have to be stopped. We've got PFAS problems. If you get our newsletter, or you go to the website and you see my news headline update, you probably want to check that. I put things like that in there. We've got a couple of bad bills and we have a couple of good bills. We want to talk about that. And then on Friday, February 7th, we're going to have Tom Gann and Marvin Goodman on, and they're going to talk about flock cameras and ALPRs and the problems that we're having with the usurpation of our liberty with that particular issue. And I think that's going to be a great conversation. You won't want to miss that. So again, thank you so much for being with us today. You guys are just the best. I really appreciate that. And be sure to say some prayers for Michael and the whole Grande family against this flu and get him to feeling better. So thanks again. We'll see you on Friday with Tassie Catherine and Pike Off OTA. Have a great day.